Hello and welcome to The Art of Growth, where we use the Enneagram and the best tools we can find to help teams, organizations, and individuals experience self-knowledge, self-awareness, and transformational habits. Today, we are going to continue in our conversation with Suzanne York about teams and how people function together and what is possible when we each bring our best to each other and to a team environment. And we wanted to start that conversation, which we will be continuing soon. Before we get into this episode, we wanted to let you know that we are doing a free webinar this Thursday, April 2nd at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can sign up for it for free on our website, www.theartofgrowth.org. We're going to be talking about some of the things that are continued from our last couple conversations about teams, team dynamics, and how it is that we interact and work together. So please join us this Thursday. It's a free webinar. All you have to do is sign up and you can show up. If you are interested in having the Art of Growth team train or consult in your organization, you can contact us at www.theartofgrowth.org. And if you're interested in individual coaching, you can reach out to us there as well. But for now, let's get into this week's episode.
I'm Joel Hubbard.
I'm Suzanne York.
And I'm Jim Zartman. And Suzanne is going to tell us a story that's going to kick off the conversation of where we're going today.
Yes. So I have a story that's based on performance management systems within corporate America. So it's a hot topic.
Those are sexy words all put together.
I know, right?
Like, oh, man. Everyone's just salivating. Where is this going?
And then there are the people who are cringing because they know exactly where I'm going.
Or they're cringing because they're like, what is that?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. All of the above.
All of the above.
So it's a big topic in corporate America, how we motivate employees, how they understand how they're doing in relationship to the work that people are measuring them against, and how they're doing against expectations and peer relationships. So performance management is this big, meaty topic around really how do we set objectives and then give employees feedback and measure them against those objectives. Usually, historically, those performance management conversations have been annually, maybe with a midpoint check-in, and there's usually a document that's really robust that outlines what do you need to do and how do you need to show up as you do it. And most people hate the entire process.
Yeah, it sounds awful. I'm
already starting to perspire a little bit.
Yes.
I'm either getting nervous or bored.
Anxious.
I can't tell the difference.
Right,
Yeah.
Exactly. And none of us like it. None of us from a management standpoint having to do this for our teams and nobody as individuals. And there's a lot of amazing work and great initiatives happening in companies to really change the dynamic of the performance management systems.
Yeah.
One reason I believe that that's happening is a call to action from employees to say, see me, know me, give me feedback and help me develop in a way that makes me a better employee, not that helps you create different results as a company. And I really appreciate that call to action. And I don't know where it's coming from, if it's the generations that are entering the workforce or otherwise. But my experience, having been in the work world for a little longer than I'd want to say, is that through the years, I have not been given feedback that aligns with who I am and where I want to go. And instead, I've had bosses or people give me feedback that was more about them and more along the lines of how could I be more like them and how can I succeed in a way that matches their path, not necessarily carving out my own path. And it took me a while to realize that was what was happening. And the way that it came to light for me was I would get this feedback and I would work really hard to live up to the feedback. And I would exhaust myself trying to do that because it didn't fit. It wasn't the right solution for me as a person. And I didn't have the language. I didn't have a way to articulate my needs and who I wanted to be because a lot of the feedback is also given to you based on the role that you're in. So if you're for example, senior manager role in finance, that role needs to achieve certain objectives for the business. And the feedback you're giving as an individual is in relationship to that role and the results that it needs to give. Versus looking at the person and saying, hey, you've got these really amazing gifts. how do we apply these gifts to what we're trying to do as an organization in a way that keeps you energized and keeps you going? So that's my vision for performance management, is that we can work to change the conversation away from the role and more towards the person, and not the person giving the feedback, but the person receiving the feedback.
That's really good.
Yeah, I love that.
There's a lot of ways in which we just sort of do projection. If we're not very self-aware, we tend to project onto other people like success looks like this, and I am a couple steps further in success than you are. And so if you're going to be successful, it therefore looks like me. And there's this desire to make the world in our own image. But Joel takes it a step further, and he actually uses the phrase that people moralize their type.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I think that's a fascinating phrase. Could you explain a little bit about that?
You're talking about your story as a type 2. And type 2s can moralize their type by explaining why being more connected to people is important, and why people's stories matter, and why caring for people matters more than, say, perhaps vision or direction or action. And this is the right thing. This is the way we should treat people, and we're not treating people the right way. And at first that sounds okay, but then it leads to something further for, say, the type 2, which would be, now even the need that I have for affirmation or getting my own needs met, not by expressing my needs, but by serving other people in hopes that they meet my needs, even that starts to get moralized in that, serve other people, do things for other people, work for other people, then your needs will be met. I've actually heard 2s say that who are unaware 2s.
Yeah.
You meet the needs of the people and then your needs get met. And there's sort of like an energy behind that and a bit of an anger behind that. Because you can tell that they haven't had their needs met.
Yeah.
We tend to see the world through that lens of the type, and we tend to then justify the behavior of our type and add some morality to it. And so that happens for every type. Me, I can see how my 7 does it. So, and Jim, I'm sure, sees how his 8 does it. So I think that's how I've seen types moralize, and very much myself included, moralize and justify behavior. Yeah.
It's two-dimensional leadership. Like, I've definitely seen a lot of two-dimensional leadership where someone is moralizing their type by saying it's all about efficiency. Like, we are to be as efficient as possible. Efficiency will lead to success.
Right.
And it's like 3, type 3. If it's then three-dimensionalized, then it's not just about moralizing that single messaging. There's difference between clarity of vision and a oversimplification and single messaging that comes from like moralizing the type. And if it's like all about, well, this will give us stability, this will give us security. Even the way you first communicated that story to us, just like I'm sitting there before the person who is my boss at the time, everything they're communicating, what's going through my head is they're trying to make me more like them and less like me.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are getting more and more exhausted, and they're one of the reasons they're burning out. And that's a huge problem in the workplace. It's a huge problem even among the depression and anxiety of college students, which is at an all-time high. Is there's this thing of like, I'm being told to fit into something that isn't me.
Yeah.
And it's being given in such a prescriptive way that this is the only way to get there.
Right. No, it makes a lot of sense. And I look at burnout and what people are going through in terms of the energy we have is finite. And if we're having to spend energy to try and fit in a way that's not natural to us, we're expending energy that could be put to better use.
Yes. There's an energy flow. I love that, because there's an energy flow that's natural to each type.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Well, go further in that. You're onto something. I want you to chase that down a little more.
This is fascinating because I hadn't thought of it from a type perspective, just from an energy flow standpoint. Doing what you're passionate about and where you feel like you're adding value and it rejuvenates you, that's where spending energy creates energy. And that cycle allows people to be more resilient and allows people to avoid some of the burnout that we're seeing.
Yep.
Ooh, that's
you put
important.
language to exactly what I've been talking to my clients about is, moving more in the natural flow of your type, which is not just every type has the same exact outcome. every type will pick a completely different industry, a completely different thing that they're passionate about, but it does fit with their type, and there's a natural flow to that. And if you work in that, there's a reciprocal sort of energy flow. Like you put out, but it comes back in. It's very rewarding.
Yes.
And so you don't come home exhausted from the psychic stress of not having done anything meaningful with your day, feeling like it was terribly wasteful, or you were bored, or you were just working so hard at something that's really not your passion, and doing that over and over again for weeks, for months, and then burning out. Yeah, there's a certain flow each type has, and when you're functioning from that, there's this energy that comes back to you. There's a sense of reward. There's a sense of you get to enjoy the strength of your own type. And really, when you understand how you're made and you love how you're made, you really start to enjoy the strength of your type.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
And actually be okay with that. I'm pretty good at this. This is something I do really well. I like that about me.
Yeah.
And a lot will shift when you can get yourself into that frame of reference. For me personally, the first thing that happened was I recognized when I was out of sync. I couldn't name it. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the energy flow was not there, and I was very much out of alignment with what probably at the point I didn't have the language, what my type called for. That's what sent me on a real introspective journey to say, well, if this isn't working for me, what would work for me? What do I want? What would different look like? And we talk about change, that it happens when you can no longer stay still.
Yeah.
And I got to the point where the being so out of sync with the energy flow meant I needed to do something different. And I didn't necessarily know what it was. And that journey has been, for me, really insightful and has shifted a lot for me personally.
I'm wanting to pull some language out that I heard and then enhance it and dig back into it a little bit, because there's a couple things that you guys were saying that I want to zero in on, because I think a lot of people have this experience where they work and they're just exhausted from it all the time. And I was just thinking, like, there is a kind of energy that you put into work that returns to you and re-energizes you to do it again. And there's other energy that you spend and it's gone forever. And it's like you can never get it back. And if too high of a percentage of your work is only the kind you never get back, you are headed towards burnout. And it's like, get the message early before you're in that place. Like if you're in a work environment like right now where you're just like, it's always spending and there's none of that energy return to want to do it again and want to do it, to expand it, you're not in a good place. You probably need to shift gears or you're headed towards a cliff.
Right. And a lot of times when people get to that point, they just don't know where to start. They know they're at an inflection point. They know they don't want to continue on the path that they're on. And it can be a little overwhelming. And so that's where finding a tool like the Enneagram is incredible to help jumpstart and catalyze people's knowledge of themselves and ability to measure that against where they are and what they really want.
I would want to push back a little bit on something, though, and that is there are some people like myself, and I'm thinking about my own journey, where I burned out not just because I wasn't doing the things that are natural to my energy flow, but it's also that my type was trying to consume and get more out of things that, more out of the work that I was doing than what it could ever do for me.
Wow.
And they describe the vice as gluttony. I was utterly shocked and a little bit embarrassed to discover that was true, but like true, like in every respect. Like I thought about my relationships. I thought about my work. And so it's both. Both have to be looked at, I think, if we're going to do the deeper work and really understand that you can be forever chasing what you think is out there that's going to meet your needs, that's going to satisfy you. And it's never going to because part of it is your type. And then there is the type of work that you do that can line up, as you were describing so eloquently, can either line up or not line up with your passions, your type, your values. You're talking about alignment. I love that word. It doesn't align with who you are.
Right.
And I think that's also part of the recipe for burnout.
Yeah. Well, in that question of who you are, I think we take that for granted. There was a part of my life where I was very much on autopilot. And if you had asked me that question at the time, I don't think I could have answered it.
No, I don't think I could have either back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You bring up an interesting point, Joel, which is we add a layer of complexity. We add a layer of nuance when you can kind of do work that feeds the addiction of your type as well.
Oh, that's well put. Yeah.
Oh, I totally get that.
Yeah, right. It's uncomfortable, but that
yes,
it totally can. Where I've met therapists who they do a lot of work helping other people in order to feel loved, but without ever dealing with their own shit.
Yeah.
And I think that is a real thing that happens too. So, I mean, how do you kind of navigate this thing? You don't want to burn out because you're doing all the wrong things, but then you also don't want to avoid your personal growth by doing only things that double down on the lie of your type or the addiction of your type.
Yeah. I'd imagine it's being a little more deliberate. It totally resonates with me what you're saying. As a 2, I'm a helper, and I can help others to the point of deficit for myself. And it wasn't until I understood that this desire to help was, well, not my fault. It's my type. I could start to check in and say, oh, I really want to help. And then say, wait a minute, do I really want to help? Am I naturally inclined to offer help because of my type? And is this the type of helping scenario that's going to fill me up, or am I going to feel depleted afterwards? So the self-knowledge was helpful, and the ability to be more purposeful in the choices I made around my types. What did you call it? My vice?
The addictions?
The addictions.
Yeah.
I could be addicted to helping.
Oh, yeah. We all are addicted to our type. That's why we moralize it. We need to moralize it. Otherwise, we're going to have to face our addiction. Because those are the people either you have to defend it, right? Thomas Merton talks about that. He's like, if we take our mask to be our true face, that we will defend it at any cost, even the cost of our own values. And I think that is what happens. But the other side of that is to just stay in the addiction of it and just feed it eternally. Yeah.
And you can go a long time on that because I think that's the wow, yeah, because that is the type's energy naturally found an outlet. It found a way to continue being itself. And it can continue on and on. It's like a 7 that is able to travel, host a lot of fun events, and forever have something new in their work world. And they're on fire. And why would you ever stop if that's really
it's so funny. I have a friend who does that. All he does is he has a YouTube adventure channel.
Wow.
That's the world.
That's amazing.
But to slow down and have some kind of stability is
Yeah. Well, this is where we're getting more, and I think I'm really appreciative to the younger generation because I'm finding that there's some hidden wisdom in that generation where they're looking more for the fruitfulness of your whole life and not just an aspect of your life.
Yes.
And that's how I put language. I don't know how they would. When we're looking at, okay, fine, you're a therapist, you're getting to feed that addiction of being there for other people, serving other people. Wonderful. But then what happens when you come home? What happens in your own personal private life? That is really important because we're finding that so many people are, not secretly or not secretly, coming home and addicted to, alcohol or other substances, can't fall asleep without certain things helping them fall asleep, all sorts of things like that. Yeah. And it's not that disqualifies you, but it just means, are you aware of it? And are you starting to move towards a healthier pattern? So that's a really good point you brought up in terms of the addiction of the type. And that can also ultimately lead to burnout and crashing and sabotaging. I mean, you can sabotage your own success because you're not doing your own personal work, and you push anything to an extreme, and eventually it cracks.
Yeah.
And I think there is an element where people have to individually grow in that self-knowledge, that self-awareness and transformational habits, as we talk about, which keeps people from those patterns getting stuck in those long terms. But I think there's a complicated thing too. If you're a leader and you feel some kind of a responsibility for not wanting to see the people around you do that, you want to be the opposite of the boss that Suzanne you had that experience with, where you want to be someone who brings the best out of everyone around you, in your family, in your spouse. I mean, I've shared openly on this podcast where I say the worst mistake in my marriage was treating my wife for 10 years like she should be more like me. And like just having to come clean about that, having to repent of that and straight up be like, this was wrong because you're not. And
Right.
I was undervaluing who you are.
Yeah.
And I think if you're in any kind of situation where you have influence over another human being, especially when you're trying to lead a larger team, how do you develop sort of the wherewithal to wanting, protect and guide and people to their best selves? Like, this is a hard kind of thing to approach.
Well, I'm thinking of one of my friends who's a high-level manager at a company said to me, I find myself managing conflict more than I do getting the work done, and it drives me nuts. And why won't they just do their work? And why is it that they're always, there's always a problem. There's always some kind of relational issue, conflicts. It's just drives him nuts. And he's feeling the pressure from higher level managers, and CEOs are feeling the pressure of, incredible amount of pressure to make sure that the entire organization is doing well. And so everybody's feeling this pressure of having to produce and having to make sure that the company's bottom line is doing well. And you've got these relational dynamics and issues that are at play.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got my own stories of leading in ways that did not bring the best out in others, and what that then did for me in wanting to become a better leader. There's one in particular where I was leading a part of a work stream on a very intense, large-scale change initiative that was global in nature, and technically it had a lot of technology and process elements, and it was very complex. And the timelines were aggressive, and the burn rate of the consultants that were helping us was extremely high. And so all eyes were on this project. So looking back on it, I can see how I let that pressure get to me in a way that was not productive for everyone that worked for me. So in some cases, it was fine, the large team that I had. But I can remember this one in particular scenario where I didn't realize I was doing it, but I was not bringing the best out of one of my employees. And the feedback that I got from her was hard to hear. And it was hard to hear in a way because it was never my intention. So I wasn't going into this relationship with her intending to stifle her strengths and her gifts. I just literally didn't see them and didn't consider the fact that the way I was approaching her did not allow her to show up with her gifts in a productive way. It was really the feedback that caused me to then say, well, right or wrong, it doesn't matter if her perspective was truth or not. It was her truth, and it did not match the way I wanted to show up. And then I thought to myself, well, if it doesn't match how I wanted to show up or how I intended, how do I want to show up? What matters to me? How do I want people to talk about me when I'm not in the room? And is that what was actually happening? And so then I went really deep on that inner work and the inner conversation about the bigger picture for who I was and how I wanted to lead.
Yeah, I think it's one of the biggest gifts in any leader's life is when you have a moment of failure maybe where you realize how people are experiencing you, and you realize it's like nothing like you thought people were experiencing you.
Yeah.
You want people to experience you. And I think for a lot of us, like, it's a blind spot. I think it was a blind spot for most of my mid-20s to like late 30s, like just going, wait, really? That's how you saw me? That's how you experienced me?
Yeah, that's what that moment was like. Yeah. And I look back and it was actually a gift
Yeah.
It was hard in the moment.
I bet it
and-
felt real like a gift in the moment.
No, not so much. Not so much. And yeah, the conversations back home with my husband, it was not a gift for him either because I had to work through it out loud.
Yeah, of course.
He's on the receiving end of my verbal processing. That's where I do come back to the more we can all come at this from a place of common ground. We're all humans trying to do the right thing. We all misunderstand ourselves and each other. And if there's a way to unlock the conversation to gain greater understanding, I think we could create some collective transformation.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons that Forbes referred to the Enneagram as like the combination for your team's dynamics.
Yeah.
They did an article called that. We posted it on our website. You can read it at theartofgrowth.org. But I think it's so true, like having a tool like this where you can actually start to unlock like, oh, how is the world experiencing me? I think some companies use that 360 degrees.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And it's like how are you being experienced in every direction of your life? And I mean, for some people, it's just a very jarring kind of experience. In fact, for most, it's just most people have no idea how the world around them sees them.
Yes.
To my shock, our admin said to me, there are different versions of you. And I said, what are you talking about? And she said, there's the coach you. Mm-hmm. I pastor as well. So they said, well, and then there's the pastor you. There's the you running meetings. And that's a different you altogether. And then I reflected
That's more like
back.
the CEO version of you.
Yeah, exactly. It would be much more closer to that. Absolutely. Right. And so about 9 years ago or so, I had quite a few fallouts with relationships with people because I was pushing so hard in a particular direction. I wanted to see us succeed. And I lost relationship with this couple that had been close to me and Patty. They just blew out and they were gone. And it impacted a lot of us deeply. They were very much involved. They were leading at a lot of high levels, and it was just really close partner with us. And several years ago, I said, hey, I'd love to have a reconnect and maybe see if we could work things through. And I had the gift of last week being able to meet with him.
Just last week?
Just last week. We were able to just have a conversation of talking about this very thing that we're talking about right here. Like I was able to say to him, I realized a lot of things I didn't know back then. I didn't know the impact I was having on people.
Yeah.
I didn't know that there were different versions of me and that depending upon, the day, the forum, you might experience me one way and then another way. I also can see how my 7 was just out of control and I was chasing everything, chasing new ideas, shifting gears on you guys all the time. It was making it very difficult for you to be in partnership with me. And I wasn't staying true to anything. It was just always like, well, let's try this or let's do this. And that was, while to me it felt like new and fun and aren't you going to love it? You're all going to love it, right? Because this is great. This is a new thing and everybody loves new.
Is this
That's
exciting?
the way
It should be exciting, right?
It should be
You should be so excited. Aren't you excited? I'm excited. Right?
And I can convince you to be excited.
I'm going to try.
I'm going to work really hard.
I'm going to believe I can convince you.
Well, that's
to
what
be
I would
excited.
walk away with.
Right.
Is I was sure that I convinced you. I was sure you loved it. And so when people would say, how'd that conversation go? I'd say, oh, fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
They loved what they heard.
Yes.
They were totally into it. And I was so sure of it that when I found out the opposite, it was devastating. It was like, are you what? Really? You didn't experience it? So this was a constant thing for me throughout my years. And so it was really fun and funny to have this reconciliation kind of thing happen where I was just like, I totally see that. I drove you nuts. I made it so hard for you. So we had this wonderful, real short healing kind of engagement. And it was wonderful. But it just was so obvious how now I can look back and see this, that I didn't know the impact I was having on people.
Yeah.
And it really took me listening to how people experience me to then see. Because there's the self-awareness that we develop through the Enneagram and through other tools. But But then there's do you know how you're impacting other people? Do you see that as a leader, as a CEO, as an employee? Do you see the impact you're having on others? And that's really, I think, a game changer when you do.
Yeah, for sure. And what I wish I had had back then with that employee or the whole team was this combination of here's my type and here's how it could get received by others. Here's her type and how I might receive it. And the ability for our two types to come together and to possibly have some friction. Mm-hmm. And so that combination, that level of insight, and as managers of people, it doesn't take that much investment to get that profound return.
No, not at all. Not at all. This can be done. This is the thing that a lot of people are so surprised by. And I've worked with some organizations, and there's an anticipation this is going to be, this is going to be so hard. It's going to another personality system. It's going to be really difficult. We're going to have to learn new. And when it's, oh no, this is all that it takes. There's a whole lot more you can do, and you should be doing, yes, but just by starting off with a few things, you're going to see some significant returns on this. Like, people will respond very differently to you once you understand your own personality and how you're reacting to the world around you, and then also that what we call is that bridge between the two islands. Each person, each type is like this island, and then we talk about how do you create that bridge between the two of you, and it's not a whole lot. You can really do it with some simple awareness things, and then, you can bring out the best out of each other. But,
That's great.
I mean, sometimes all it takes is just, oh, I see that now. Like sometimes that's enough. Like it's amazing how just being able to see. Joel stole the one C.S. Lewis quote about the Enneagram is not something I look at. It's something by how it's like light where I can see other things because of it.
It's like I don't look at the sun. It's by the sun that I see everything, sort of.
Yeah, it's that kind of concept. It's like a way to be able to see.
Right.
And definitely it should start internally. It should start with me seeing, like me being honest and seeing myself and like, oh, I do that. And I don't even think about doing that.
Yeah.
So therefore, once again, like I've taken away the option, and now I can actually live with a lot more intention. When you ask that question, Suzanne, I think that is a question. Like, how do I want people to experience me?
Yeah. There's also some work around the speed of trust. And one of the elements of that is to declare your intentions. And I find with knowing more about myself and being able to say, hey, this is what I need. I don't necessarily need to say it's because of my type. But if I can better articulate my needs and declare my intention and what's about to happen, I can fast track the conversation with someone and the trust that we have between each other too.
Hey, before we continue with this week's episode, we wanted to remind you that you can sign up for the webinar that continues the conversation on this topic and covers other things on team dynamics at our website, www.theartofgrowth.org. That webinar is this Thursday, April 2nd at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and you can register on our website. And this is something we mentioned in our previous episode for a lot of managers or people who are trying to run organizations and they're wondering about how to motivate their employees. We want to make the argument that if you don't know how the people around you are motivated, it's very hard to motivate them. And part of our work is helping you learn the dynamics of that so that your team is more successful as a team. So you don't just have a bunch of experts, but an expert team. So even as you're listening, you can go to our website and there's links on there for our Instagram and our Facebook page. And if you join our Facebook page, there's some other things that are coming up as well, including, I think, some morning coffee sessions, perhaps. So we will now continue with this week's episode.
I think we give each other, and I think this is what's wonderful about understanding the Enneagram and using it in corporate America, is you can finally admit this is your core need.
Yeah.
And it's okay. There's no shame around it. Like, your core need is to be wanted, is to be connected to people as a two. That's cool.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
And what helps you with that is knowing that you're being helpful. So a little feedback is actually remarkably helpful.
For sure.
Right? So this is what we mean by it. It doesn't take a whole lot. And it was funny when I've done this with organizations, their eyes bug open and they say, really, it's not that that's the only thing you need. But it's like, if I did that for you, that would be meaningful? Yes. Well, I would have never thought of that.
Right. Because it's not something you need.
Because it's not what I need.
Right.
Right.
It's so
and I'm
funny
giving you something that
I'm giving you what I think
what I think you need, and you have no interest in.
Totally.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh God.
Yeah. I had a 3 tell me. Do you remember how I was giving you a lot of that positive feedback and affirmation, a few years ago? And I said, yeah, and he's like, I get it now. I was giving it to you because I need it. It's like, oh, right. Because now I so remember you doing that. And I love positive feedback too. As a 7, this is 7 and 3s can be lookalikes in that way. It's like, oh, absolutely. I love that. But it was his self-reflection like, oh my goodness, no wonder.
Yeah.
I was doing that for you thinking you needed it, but it's really something that I need and I'm always looking for.
Yeah. I think the feedback conversation is so rich for looking at it through the different lenses. As a 2, receiving feedback is a really interesting experience. It sometimes depends on how it's positioned. Maybe that's for everybody as well. And then giving feedback. It's hard for me to give difficult feedback to someone. There's probably a lot we could talk about in terms of helping people give and receive feedback in different ways based on the type you have and the type of the receiving party.
I think when you understand who you are and you've accepted it with no shame around it, there's a lot more margin for feedback because it's less of an assault on the ego and it's more something that can be added to. At first I rolled my eyes when they used to talk about here's your strengths and opportunities or something in one of those feedback things.
Yeah.
Here's the opportunities that you and I would always cringe a little bit because I'm just calling BS in my head the whole time. I'm just come on.
Yeah.
You don't sandwich it for me. Don't do that soft start to a conversation. Don't do the soft launch conversation.
What you're really good at, Jim.
Yeah.
And what we like about you.
Yeah. And here's what you are awful at. I mean, opportunity.
This is an opportunity for you to improve.
And then this is also something we like about you. It's just kind of like you only said the other 2 things to get the freaking thing in the middle.
Right.
But if they were like, okay, this is actually Jim's core need as an 8, he has this need for strength. And the upside of that is he wants to make others strong. If you go, if I know that and I don't have ego around it and I want to improve in that area, and they can be like, well, here's a way that you can better reach the goal that you already have, the motivation you already have, the drive you already have. I'm not going to be resistant to that. I'm not going to be looking at them sideways. I'm going to be like, that's awesome. Yes. That's great.
Yeah.
I can receive it. I can take that in because I'm not trying to defend something. And I think when it goes back to the feedback of you're trying to make me more like you, then I'm rejecting everything you're saying anyway.
Oh, totally.
It's not going to land anyway. Yeah. So you can actually try and give me something that I'm never going to receive or care about and it's just going to lead me to burnout. Or you can give me something that already enhances the internal motivation that I already have. And then I'm not going to get defensive of it. Then I actually welcome that feedback. I get excited about it.
Right.
Because I'm like, that helps me be more like me.
Yes.
Then it's a yes all around.
Right. And that's true coaching. That's
amazing.
This is where leaders actually do best when they're using that to coach their employees.
Yeah.
Bring out the best. And if we were to do this, just to give an example for everyone, is think about the 7, if you're saying to a 7, to me, so I'll personalize it, is if I had a boss that said, you know what I love about you is I love that you think outside the box. I love how you think big picture. You're always bringing that. And you have this amazing ability to connect things that others don't, ideas, concepts. You see things in the corporate world that the rest of us don't see. Mm-hmm. That's all very helpful. But here's what can sabotage that incredible gift you have is when you don't bring other people with you. And the way you can bring people with you, Joel. And that is enormously helpful for me. And that's been said to me. And when it's been said that way, does it feel good? No. That still stings, right? But I love it because I love it in reflection because you're making me a better person, a
Yeah.
better version of who I really am.
Well, and it's anchored in what you are strong at.
Right.
It's not for just, outside and superfluous.
Yeah.
And for the bosses that I've had that haven't nailed the feedback, I can think of at least 2, if not more, bosses who have really done an amazing job with this. And it is around highlighting the gifts that you bring and giving you the option about taking or leaving the piece of feedback they have for you for a growth area or an opportunity, Jimmy. And so for them, I've been very grateful because there are times where they have seen things in me I have not seen in myself. And the way that they've approached it has been easy for me to receive, and then they've helped me grow beyond where I even thought possible.
Can you give an example of that?
Oh, absolutely. I can think of a couple of them. I can remember being assigned a project, and it was more in the strategy realm, and I am definitely more in the people side. And it was getting really clear on the strategy for a division within the company. And taking on that work, I thought, I don't think I can do this. And what he said to me was, let me tell you all of the skills that you have that indicate to me that you can do this, and let me give you the confidence that you will be able to achieve it. And so I was able to take on that piece of work and get some really great experience. And that allowed me to connect to people that I had never met before in the company and create deeper relationships in different parts of the business that filled my cup up while I spent my energy doing work that was new and different and challenging for me. And I think he probably saw in me the desire to be the connector of ideas and of people. And he knew that would come through when I didn't see it initially based on the assignment he gave me.
That is great. Yeah. Well, that's really good leadership. I had a type 3 boss who did something similar to me in that he could see I had a lot of great ideas and he loved my ideas. And I believe that he was a type 3. And he would say, oh, those are just fantastic ideas, Joel. Those are great. I think you should do it. And I'd say, yeah. But as a 7, because I thought about it and I thought a lot about it, I loved the whole process of thinking about it and exploring it. It's about as good as done. It's not in the execution. And he saw that. And at one point, he said to me, Joel, this is like the 3rd month we've had this conversation. And you keep exploring it and you love it and you come up with great ideas. I want you to do this and I'm not going to give you an out. You have to do it. And there was a timeline and it was a matter of, I think, a few weeks. And he said, I want you to give me the first draft at this project that you're going to do. I was really angry that he made me do this.
Wow.
Because I felt exposed. I felt embarrassed because I talked a lot about things, but I wasn't executing. I struggled, sweated, was so anxious. I put it together thinking he's going to rip it apart. He looked at it and said, I love it. This is fantastic, Joel. Oh, really? Yeah. Okay. But now I want you to make it happen. I want you to actually implement it.
Wow.
By this month, and it was like that, I think the month of June. I want you to execute it in June. And I was like, oh
Paralyzed.
my gosh. Again, like that whole thing, the anxiety rose up. I was angry that he was making me pull this off because it was a big idea.
Yeah.
It was a big project, and it was one that I'd never done before and felt like was beyond where I was, So I did it, and I pulled it off, and I was angry still at him for this while I was doing it.
Wow.
Right? And he snuck in on a couple of them to observe me, which made me even angrier.
Yeah.
But then afterwards, he gave me the biggest affirmation.
Yeah.
He said, that was the best I've ever seen you do. You did amazing, Joel. And the results are evident. I'm hearing all kinds of incredible stories.
Wow.
I'm so proud of you. And it took me to a higher level, way beyond what anything else. If he had just let me go on my own, I would not have gotten there. But like you, he saw that there's something there.
Yeah.
You're very good at this piece, but this is what's keeping you from higher levels of success, right? And you're 7. He didn't want to change my 7. He just wanted me to excel at that and be even better than I was.
Wow, that's a really neat story. And it does take others giving us a reason to go beyond and not allow the type to be a limiting factor. In that experience you had with the boss who extended you what felt like beyond your comfort zone,
Yeah.
in the end it turned out to be a real gift. for you in your personal individual development. I can also see a scenario where recognizing that your strengths were in the upfront visionary work and not necessarily the back-end execution, and pairing you with someone who actually thrives on that execution.
Yeah.
Because there are people who really do enjoy taking an idea and creating the plan around it and executing the plan.
Yeah.
And so what comes to mind for me is this idea that not everyone needs to be able to do everything, but every team needs to have every capability on it.
But there's something about expanding the capacity too, because you did feel like you reached a new level because you did step outside of that comfort zone, because you didn't just do what was natural. Or what if someone had come alongside and done all the execution? You may have actually missed something out though.
Yeah.
Well, not necessarily. Okay. So I love the question. Because you're making me think. But I think that there's a wonderful pairing between those two. Okay, so let's say this boss says to me, you have to do this by June, and I want a first draft in the next couple weeks. I did come up with it. Honestly, to my mind, I think it was okay. But you know what? It was my wife who helps me with it.
Oh.
I didn't add that part.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just remembered it too.
You just took all that credit.
I wanted to take the credit for it and say it was me, but no, she helped me formulate it.
Yeah.
But it was my external processing where she can actually then go, okay, let me help you with putting it down in a more succinct or more organized way. I'm not an organized person, so that's not my natural strength, is to organize things in a way that's helpful to others. If he had said to me, I want you to sit with this person who's good at organizing. Just verbalize your thoughts and let them organize it. And then you'll learn something. So this doesn't make you weaker. So I think to the question, that makes me think of that. Like, would it have made me weaker? No, because you know what? Even the next time I had to execute something, I was still as terrified as I was the first time. And I still leaned on my wife. I think it would have been better if there was someone who was more part of that team, that it was viewed as a team. Like, it's not just the Joel show. It's Joel and these other people who, this person's highly organized and actually creates wonderful material. This other person helps Joel to figure out what's helpful, what isn't helpful for this particular project, and kind of creates more structure. I believe in team to that level. I don't think if you're going to fly really at a higher level, you really have to do it with team, because there are people that are exceptional in certain areas you're not. I think that would have been more helpful to me, because these people would have said, here's, I think, what you're trying to say. And then it helps me organize my thoughts even better. And I get better at thinking out loud and organizing my thoughts at least a little bit more. And I get used to working with people and actually figuring out what I need and what I don't need. Yeah. Like, there's some parts of it that I did need to expand and get better at, and other parts of it that then I discern, this I will never really be excellent at, and here's where the boundary line is. And that's where I bring somebody in, right? That you don't know at first. You do need to be pushed. You do need to be stretched, early on in life. But then you also need to recognize, this is pretty much it. Like, I'm never going to be excellent at this space in maybe executing tactics, or I might be great at the higher level strategy piece of it. You get to lower level where it starts to get more into the sort of creating structure and then developing some tactics. I'm never going to be good at that. Yeah. But I didn't know that initially. The structure
is the higher level, Joel. The structure is the higher level.
And the types come out.
It's the most important part.
It's the most important part. It's like, even framing it in a higher level.
I actually believe that.
I know.
I actually believe that. Most of what I say, I feel like, is like, please, anybody could have said that. Like, it's not I don't know. I'm just talking.
I know. I'm just calling that out. I'm just going to put I'm just putting that out in real time.
I'm totally glad you did. I believe that
way.
Well, and wouldn't it be great if we can invite those conversations inside of companies to say, hey, let me try this thing and give me a chance to come back and tell you if it's not my thing.
Yeah.
Because for me, maybe it's my type, but it would be hard for me. Well, it has in the past been hard for me to say what I'm not good at for fear that that's going to limit my growth opportunities.
Yeah.
But instead, if I could have positioned it as, hey, I tried this and realized it's not an area of strength, so let me channel where I am strong and put my energies towards that.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's like me trying to write with my left hand all day.
Right.
I cannot go as fast or as far doing that. When I then use my dominant hand, I'm far better at, and the energy is channeled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think one of the gifts with the Enneagram and some of the self-awareness, if you have that, it just came out in this moment right here. And I know it now in my marriage. And then it actually just came out with a client last week where once you actually see the type and you see the patterns, there's a lightness about it.
Yes.
It can be turned into – it doesn't feel like, oh, no, shame or heaviness or obligation or anything like that. You can laugh about it. It is funny. Like Abby and I will do that now. Like in our marriage, it's just kind of like, oh, that's funny that look at who's showing up, exactly who is here. It's that obvious.
Yeah.
And I did the exact same thing with a client where it started to get really heavy. And I was like, so we're talking about this issue that came up a week ago, but you're experiencing it in real time right now. And I said, so all of those things that you're talking about showing up back then are showing up right now. And it started to get kind of dark for a second. But then as we started like recognizing a pattern, it turned into laughter. And like we ended the session, like her like giggling and like laughing about this thing because like, oh, yeah, look at what showed up. And I think one of the biggest gifts of self-awareness is actually there's a lightness to something that used to feel heavy.
Yeah. Well,
and that's when you can address the heavy. Because the thing is that people are afraid of even talking about the dark side or the lower side of the type sometimes because it comes with so much shame and so much heaviness.
Right.
Which is if you could say, no, we're going to look at the dark side and we're
unnecessary.
going to laugh.
Yeah.
And it's going to be really funny. It's going to be really lighthearted. And there's a lot of grace and a lot of space for you. Like,
Yes.
That's, I think, much more the approach that I think is helpful.
Oh, totally. This work should be about laughing in the face of your darkness, laughing in the face of your shame.
yeah. That's amazing. I'd much rather that than the alternative.
Yes. That's no more of the heaviness. Let us call forth the good things. Let us call forth the person who is and the person who can be, but do it with joy and do it with lightness and do it with the truth and the belief that we do not have to be omnicompetent. We do not have to have everything all together, but we do rise together. We do go further together. And we can actually do that with more joy when we appreciate and value who we are.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us this week on this episode. We want to get the individual journey right. And so we've done a lot of work around that, but we really want to get it right too, as far as how we impact other people and how we relate to other people and how we can work and combine our energies and our gifts to bring the best gifts to this world that we can. So one last time reminder, you can join us this Thursday for our free webinar. These won't be free for long, but you can get in there now. Team Dynamics this Thursday, April 2nd at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and sign up on our website, www.theartofgrowth.org. You can also join our Facebook page, our Instagram, and all that jazz, because we exist in those worlds. All right. This show is produced by me, Jim Zartman, at Talkie Records Studio in Lynn, Massachusetts. If you have not left us a review on iTunes yet, please do so. It helps people find the show. And we continue to be honored at your interest in our work, but thank you so much for continuing to do the work on yourself to make the world around you a better place. And if you are listening to this episode as we continue struggling through the pandemic of the coronavirus, please stay home, stay safe, and stay connected relationally, even if you are physically separate. Have an amazing week. Peace.